I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, it's Friday. It's TGU time from VLGA Connect, or it might not be Friday. You could be watching this a month from now, a year from now, who knows? So whatever day it is, welcome to TGU and welcome to Tony Rownick from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors and our resident legal eagle. G'day, Tony.
G'day, Chris and Julie. Action-packed week for me. Did you hear about the meteorite in Doreen? Did you hear that story?
No.
I was in my garage on Wednesday night and there was an enormous explosion. And it turns out there was a meteorite over northeast Melbourne, Doreen. Wow. So that was pretty exciting for me. And then what else? I learned that Sarah Lee's going into administration. So I'm really worried about those, those nice apple pies you get on the aluminium foil.
I know.
The little things that make my week.
It's a bit sad because they're part of our history, aren't they?
Can I just say that's not how
cheesecakes that they used to roll out. When you were a child, you used to have the cheesecake with the blueberry topping. That you never really liked very much, but it's sad. They're part of our history, part of our fabric.
It is. Sorry, I've taken it somewhere you didn't think.
This
Chris.
is not. This is not how.
Local government as well.
This is not how I envisaged the episode starting. But Julie Reid's here. Did you notice? Hi, Julie.
Hi, and I'm a Sarah Lee fan, as you can
Clearly.
gather. I'm a bit sad about Sarah Lee. Oh well, hopefully, hopefully it will continue on, but maybe under a different banner. Anyway, it's great to see you both. It has been a big week for me as well. It's going to be. I think we're going to end up having lots of big weeks until the end of the year. And the end of the year is not that far off, guys. It's quite scary. We're all going to be starting to think about Christmas very shortly.
It's you get to this time in October, it's a bit like an avalanche picking up speed, isn't it? Generally, and there is a lot to happen between now and the end of the year. We'll talk about some of that today. Clearly, I'm looking at different news feeds to you guys. I didn't know about the meteorite. I did see the Sarah Lee thing in passing. What I did see was a very interesting story out of Hume this week, and we've talked about the mayor of Hume, Joseph Awil, a couple of times recently. In the news again, calling for a look at some of these planning laws that allow developers who've been found to have done the wrong thing to still then be able to do what they want to do on that land. This, from your perspective, Tony, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on how this sort of thing can happen.
Yeah. So the background to this is that there's a developer in that was found guilty, fined for illegal vegetation clearance in Campbellfield in the city of Hume. That was quite a lot of property, quite a lot of vegetation removed, 1.4 hectares removed between November 2019 and January 2020, led to a criminal conviction and a pretty significant fine in the county court, $225,000. But subsequently, the developer applied for VCAT permission to clear the rest of the site of vegetation, to subdivide and build, I think, some warehouses, which was approved by VCAT in April of this year. Now, there's been that criticism, as you say, of the VCAT decision. It's only coming out now. Decision was, as I say, some months ago in April. And the mayor, Joseph Awil, there at Hume, has said, this is a decision. It tells the developers, tells them, well, you can cop the fine and then have a go at the tribunal or whatever authority is assessing this kind of application, and you will possibly be able to proceed with the development as if nothing happened. I don't see so much what the fuss is about ultimately VCAT making a decision about development on the side. I don't think we sort of ought be making planning decisions on the basis of, the character or the form of the applicant. That's not how we typically make the decisions. But it brings to mind a story on TGU going back some months, Chris and Julie. Remember we talked about the magnitude or the quantum of fines in relation to vegetation removal?
Yes.
We had various councils, I think Burundara, the director there, Scott Walker, coming out and calling for more significant fines, saying that sometimes developers might regard vegetation removal, illegal vegetation removal, and the consequent fines is just the cost of doing business. So I think the key point here for me would be perhaps the fines aren't significant enough if they're not enough of a deterrent, but I wouldn't be suggesting that, because someone has, committed an offence under a planning provision, that subsequently they should be prohibited from undertaking a development, which in all other respects, meets the planning scheme criteria.
Tony, is it fair to say one of the issues here is they're two distinct and discrete processes, aren't they? The criminal proceedings, the VCAT proceeding. But if you look at it holistically, I can see what Mayor Hawil is saying and what people in the community might be saying. This is a case of people saying it's easier to seek forgiveness than permission, because of the complex processes involved.
Yeah, and maybe if it was $1 million fine for 1.4 hectares of veg removal, that's a lot of removal. Then, developers might think twice. The actual criminal proceedings, the trial judge didn't find, well, found them guilty, didn't find that they just decided that it was, just a calculated cost of doing business to undertake the veg removal. So yeah, I think it's worthy of an examination of these fines, and are they significant enough? There's been fines of $20,000 for removal of some trees, which allows you to develop significantly at greater intensity on a site and earn significantly more profit. Perhaps the fine should be a lot higher.
Yeah, I think the story makes the point. This is an ABC News story, by the way, folks, where I think it makes the point that developers are just factoring in these costs as part of doing business. Julie, do you understand where the community perspective's coming from here, though?
Oh, boy, yes. I mean, the community are frustrated with this because they see this all the time, and particularly this, we're not talking about just any old vegetation. We're talking about endangered native vegetation here that's been removed, and this is happening all the time. Speak to enforcement officers across local government and they will tell you that this is a huge issue. They have been fighting for this for so long to make the penalties much higher than what they currently are. Now, $225,000 seems like a bit of a hit, but, as Tony says, it's a very small proportion of the value of that development. This is a multi-million-dollar development, and I agree. I think the fines have always been too low. And they need to be higher. And I do agree that needs to be a review of the legislation around those values of those fines, because it's not deterring developers from protecting that precious vegetation that we have on these sites. I see what's gone on in this situation, and it's again a similar story to many, many other sites across Melbourne. I'm sure that councils are just going, another one, So, yep, I think it's time. And look, there is an opportunity now, and I think that we know that there's going to be change coming in the planning system. We know that they're going to be reviewing the Planning and Environment Act. I think that at the moment we're potentially seeing some Band-Aid type changes to the Planning Environment Act. I think there's so many more issues that need to be addressed in a major overhaul, and this is one of them. This is one that is, if the government are serious about protecting native vegetation, they need to think about how we can have those deterrents.
All right, thanks to Joseph and Hume City Council there for shining a light on that issue this week. Fire season is upon us, folks, and councils occasionally have to issue fire prevention orders. We've got an unusual case, though, in Golden Plains, where there's been an order issued against one of its own councillors, and this matter's ended up in court, Tony.
Yes, Councillor Les Rowe has got into trouble, not for the first time, but this is in relation to, as I say, failure to comply with a fire prevention notice. So perhaps not setting the best example for fellow landowners, ratepayers out there in Golden Plains Shire. Magistrates Court proceeding, fine of $200, but significant legal costs awarded against him, $6,000. So yeah, just I think a reminder that councillors and council officers, for that matter, are you're in esteemed position, setting an example, and yeah, it's unfortunate that this incident has occurred.
All right. We'll just note that one. That is the councillor that we spoke about not that long ago, having been found to have committed misconduct in relation to another matter.
Yeah, comments about the local grading operations,
that's right.
local grading team. I think, yeah, an arbitrary finding of misconduct.
He was suspended too, if I remember rightly.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Okay. On the good news front, and I know this is an area that you have a bit to do with, Julie, geographically, I mean, the city of Yarra. They've come out with this terrific homelessness initiative that's been launched called Yarra Zero.
That's right, Chris, and I am a bit biased because I am doing some work with Yarra at the moment, and certainly seeing a lot of great things that are happening there. The Yarra councils and staff joined together with community groups and service providers to officially launch this Yarra Zero, and this is a sort of a collaborative initiative addressing homelessness and rough sleeping in the municipality. It's a great initiative. You know, there are some serious issues in the municipality about homelessness, and you know, the council are really committed to trying to help the community in addressing this. So you know, a very coordinated and compassionate response from the community towards people that are sleeping rough. So you know, look, it affects the entire community as well. It's not just those people that are homeless, but the other community as well that are, you know, concerned for these people also. So working together with service providers, they're working together with neighbouring councils, different levels of government. You know, this is where this joined up working to try and address a big issue is really something to be celebrated, because it's a great initiative.
Agree, Julie. There's been quite a bit of talk this year about trying to quantify what local government's role is in tackling homelessness, and generally there's widespread agreement that it's about working with as many other parties and stakeholders as possible to try and tackle the issue. So great example there out of Yarra. Tony, I don't know if in your legal work you do much work with councils on special charge schemes, or whether that's somebody else's specialty, but I did pick up out of Bass Coast just this past week that they've been forced to drop a special charge scheme that was proposed for a pretty significant street development down there in Port Phillip Island, I think it was, about $35 million project, spent about $1 million to get this to the point that it was, but didn't get enough support from the landholders.
Yeah. So it was the Surf Beach, Sunderland Bay special charge scheme for roads and drainage. And yeah, look, I'd certainly have familiarity with these schemes through my time on the Shire of Nillumbik, where we did quite a number of them, have a number of unsealed roads through residential areas. I think, you know, the system's worked here as it's supposed to, in the sense that, you know, under the legislation, it's the 1989 Act that still applies here, Section 163. Council undertakes, you know, extensive consultation. Presumably what would have happened is some residents in this area approach council and express concerns, presumably about dust and a lack of drainage, and council have initiated this process of working up a design, then surveying the residents as to would they support a special charge scheme process. Well, the votes are in. There's an overwhelming majority against, so you know, the project won't proceed. Well, that's, you know, how the legislative provisions work. Not all of these projects that are investigated will get up, and I guess it's just the magnitude of this one that has led to some interest. I'm not familiar with the precise details, but it's possible that there'll be, you know, with projects like this, sometimes there's a redesign, a de-engineering, a less expensive solution that is then put to the community. But yeah, it's the way the process ought to work. That, you know, we're not imposing these rates without majority support.
Yeah. Is it 70% the threshold that needs to be
I thought it was
met?
60. I thought it was 60.
Right.
But I might be wrong. I'd have to double check that. But there certainly is a threshold that needs to be met. And look, this is the system working the way it should do, as Tony's saying. It's set up to get the majority vote from the community to proceed. So I was a bit surprised that it got so much airplay, I suppose, because these happen in lots of councils across Melbourne, and it's responding to the needs of the community. Community is saying this is what we want. It's where council can't afford potentially to undertake that level of works, or bringing forward potentially a series of works that might not be able to be done immediately because of affordability. So I think that this is, it's not unusual to see these go down, because it might be that people at this point in time just don't feel that they can afford potentially the contribution towards that, even though they potentially want it. It could be a little bit of a way of lobbying the council as well. So I wasn't so concerned about this. I think it's just they've run through the process. They haven't got the majority vote, and so therefore they will abandon it for now. Whether or not they'll come back to it, or whether they'll, as Tony said, look at talking to the community about down there about, well, what else could we do that might be a different solution, that might be a cheaper solution that you might be able to be more comfortable with, which would be, a nice next step for them to go down. So, I'm watching this one with interest. I'm doing a bit of work in this space at the moment, and watching to see what's happening in this special charge scheme space. Whether or not it's time again for review of this process, I don't know. I don't think so, but it'd be interesting. I'm certainly going to follow up and learn a little bit more about their learnings down there at Bass Coast to see whether there's anything that we can share with the sector around their learning going through this scenario.
So it's probably the scale of this one that's grabbed the local media attention. I think it was about $33.5 million. 26 million of that, from when I looked at the detail, was proposed to be raised from the landowners. Interesting you say, Julie, that lots of these are happening across Melbourne, because they're sort of happening under the radar, if that's the case. Because if you'd asked me, I would have said I didn't think special charge schemes got up very often anymore. But perhaps I'm wrong.
I think there's lots of councils thinking about whether they can introduce more, or whether they can use this tool more. So they're exploring it a bit more again. I think because of the financial sustainability issues of councils, I think they're sort of coming back to it to say, is this something that we can put in place more often, or talk to the community about more often. I think they're going back to it for that reason.
Yeah, and look, they're not uncontroversial. They tend to happen on the councils on the urban fringe and in the regional areas where we have these unsealed roads, perhaps some lack of curb and channel drainage, that sort of thing. You'll have sometimes divisions in the community where some people actually like their unsealed road. They feel that it slows down traffic. That discourages people from using the road as a rat run, a connecting point. And others see are sick of hanging on the washing up and the dust, and see that the making of the roads, the engineering of the drainage will often increase the value of the property that and you tend to pay these rates off over a 10-20 year period, so it's not a big immediate hit. So essentially their council is investing in the area, and the people are paying the council back. The landowners, the ratepayers, are paying council back through the rate scheme with some interest. So yeah, not uncontroversial. We did a number of them in Eltham and Diamond Creek back in my time, and they didn't always get up, but some of them had overwhelming support as well. And it often turns on the degree of engineering. Often the residents just want the road sealed, and then they feel that the council engineers, looking at maintenance, looking at the best the best outcome from an engineering perspective will the residents will feel will over-engineer sometimes. So there's that kind of argument that goes on.
Over-egging.
I think also too, residents are sometimes a little bit unclear or surprised at how much things cost too nowadays, to seal a road or to build footpaths or whatever. There's always that comparison with, Joe Blogg's builder that, built my driveway, There's that sort of, misunderstanding, I think, of the overheads that, you have, and, the price you pay for, for example, occupational health and safety in situations like this, so they're always a bit surprised at how much things cost. But, in reality, we know how much costs have gone up with construction over the last, 10 years. It's phenomenally more expensive.
All right. I don't think we've had a special charge team discussion on TGU before, so there's a first there, and perhaps a bit of, as Tony called it, de-engineering in the future there, possibly. Some movements around the sector and sort of adjacent to talk about. The new CEO at Greater Geelong, who happened to be the former CEO at Bass Coast, Ali Wasty, has announced a new executive team. Well, the positions in the team, not the holders of the position yet, because they've just been advertised. This is part of the restructure that she's putting in place since her arrival there a few weeks back.
Yeah, encourage people to look at LinkedIn and see Ali Wasty's post there. A good, I think, lateral way of getting out into the sector, seeking for directors for these key directorships at Greater Geelong: placemaking, city life, city infrastructure, and corporate services. And prior to this restructure being announced, I think there were 5 executive positions on the executive management team there, and 3 of the 5 have been filled by people in an acting capacity. So, can see the necessity to go to market here, interesting. And we'll, of course, still have those 2 monitors in place at Greater Geelong, Prue Digby and Peter Dorling, I think,
till January,
in that role until January next year at least, monitoring these sorts of, I think, partly were appointed in relation to employment decisions.
Yeah. All right. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. As Tony said, have a look at LinkedIn for a very engaging video that Ali has done about those changes. A new commissioner of IBAC has been announced this week. Victoria Elliott is her name, and she starts in December. This has got a bit of media commentary, Tony, this week.
Yeah, I don't know, Victoria, but some of the commentary has been more good. Congratulations to Victoria, firstly, and she's come through. She's currently the Deputy Public Interest Monitor, role in relation to, monitoring the public sector and employees and that sort of thing, I believe.
And formerly worked at IBAC, knows the organisation.
Former employee at IBAC, a lawyer there. But I think that the criticism, while not directed at all at Victoria, has been around, is the government placing necessary weight on who leads these organisations? So IBAC is, has 200 employees. It has oversight of the entire Victorian public sector, Victoria Police, councils. The person who leads IBAC, the head commissioner, makes decisions about, do you investigate a Supreme Court judge, conducting public and private hearings, cross-examinations. And the criticism is that someone's been appointed who hasn't got experience as a barrister. The previous incumbents were both senior counsel or QCs. And so what it led me to think about is the Victorian Ombudsman reappointment. So Deborah Glass is currently filling that role, but she's on a 10-year term that is expiring or has shortly or has just expired. Formidable person, used to run the Independent Police Complaints Commission in the UK, came to the role already with an OBE. So how will the government replace that position, knowing that both IBAC and the Ombudsman have been sources of not criticism of the state government in terms of dealings with corruption and that in the past.
Can't believe that's 10 years. I remember meeting Deborah when she was new to the sector and just come into the role. 10 years has gone very fast indeed. Julie, thoughts?
Look, I just welcome the fact that they've filled the role. It's great to see a woman at the head of this particular complex organisation. I welcome her. She looks like she comes with great experience and credibility. Fantastic news to have someone new at the helm. And I will watch with interest what happens at the Ombudsman's office. Yeah. So thank you for alerting me to that 10-year appointment. And I think it's good to sometimes have a refresh and see some new people come through and see what they can bring to the role, and have sight on how things potentially could be improved. So I'm looking forward to seeing how there might be improvements coming in the way that IBAC operates. So let's watch that one.
And I do agree with all your comments. I just think let's give Victoria a go in the role. The media obviously is looking to spin this into something that helps them to sell papers and grab attention, etc. I think that's a little bit disingenuous and unfair on Victoria, who clearly has met the criteria to be appointed to the position. So good luck, Victoria Elliott. Julie. Councillor resignations. What was it you said a couple of weeks ago, Jane? If I have this clip.
Anyway, we'll see. We don't want to lose. We don't really want to lose anymore if we can. Let's try and keep it at 51, but who knows? I am eating my words.
We shouldn't see any more, says Julie. We've got number 53 in terms of councillor resignations in this term, and it's the youngest councillor ever elected to Glenelg Shire has resigned this week, effective on Wednesday. Now, I've just lost my page here, folks. Jaden, is it? Jaden Smith?
Yes. He resigned. He's tendered his resignation from Wednesday, I think it was. He's 25. It's sad to see someone of a younger age leave council. I was a bit disappointed to see that. I know that, he's, contributed well down there at Glenelg, and this is going to create that extraordinary vacancy that we're going to have to fill, which the VEC will initiate. I'm not too sure what's happening in that space, whether or not it's going to be a countback or have you heard, Chris, at this stage? I haven't heard.
No, not at this stage. My only clue would be going back to when Anita Rank resigned in July. That position was filled by a countback. I can't off the top of my head recall the structure. I'm assuming Glenelg. No, it could be wards. I was going to say I assume it's unsubdivided, but I actually don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see that. And of course, even if it is a countback, it relies on, and this might come into play with another matter, it relies on there being remaining eligible candidates to fill the position, Julie.
That's true. That's true. Probably the only other thing I wanted to say about this one was that in his comment in the media release, he said, every staff member at council does a good job.
That's nice.
I had to focus in on that. I thought that was a really nice thing to say because he probably didn't have to say that, but I suspect the staff were pretty happy about that comment.
No hints, though, Tony, in that announcement as to why Jaden is stepping aside. Not that he has to tell us, but we've been curious to understand the motivations of councillors not completing their terms in the last few months.
Yeah, so I think it would be great to know, what's motivating councillors when they make decisions like this to having decided to run, what's motivating them to resign. I can understand there's sometimes really key personal reasons that might play out there, but it would be interesting to know.
It would. Now, I do believe that we might have a 54th Julie on the list. Can't confirm this one yet. It's come to me in a blind item, and it might also be one that tests that are there any candidates left if you go back to a countback, or will there be a by-election required or some other mechanism brought into play? That's about as much as I can say about that one, but hopefully we'll know more in the next day or two. Sorry, I'm being a little bit vague, but deliberately there, Tony. I see a bemused look on your face.
All will be revealed.
Indeed.
Yes, and look, it is still something that I think we need to maybe discuss more before the next election. You know, maybe a panel, Chris, of people to talk about, you know, again, this training that's required for people to understand what is required as a councillor, you know, the time that's commitments that need to be made, the challenges associated with it, and also just the the importance of behaviours and holding really, you know, strong commitments to the code of conduct, etc., etc. And just still interested in whether there's a trend of more this time than after the last election. So is the trend going up, or is it about the same as what it was last time? So I'm still keen on knowing that. So we probably need...
I don't know if anyone from the VEC watches this program. If you could perhaps let us know a number from the last term of council, but I will reach out and see if I can get that number. I know I've mentioned I'll do that before, Julie, but strangely I forgot, which is more common.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to understand what's
common
going
occurrence.
on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to a couple of stories of interest from beyond Victoria's borders. In the Northern Territory this week, we've seen a council suspended. This is Barkly Regional Council. I don't think we talked much about some of the incidents that have occurred there in recent months, but this all sort of culminated with the mayor there, Jeffrey McLaughlin, who's been in a bit of hot water on a number of fronts. A video emerged a couple of weeks back of him pinning an Aboriginal boy to the ground while making what he called a citizen's arrest. He claimed that the boy had broken into his family home. There was another person there present as well on the video. It's not gone down well with the community who've called for him to step aside or resign, even the local MPs. He's refused to do that. And then there was speculation that the government might step in, and this week it has, and it's suspended that council and put a couple of people in place to run the council and to run an investigation. Not an insignificant step to take, I would have thought, Tony.
No, that's right. I think the minister might have said, though, that the decision doesn't relate to the mayor's behaviour. It's sort of concerns about deficiencies in the conduct of council affairs. You're right, that mayor has been controversial, though. I think there was some drug charges a year or so ago.
Yeah, it's probably the straw that broke the camel's back in a sense, Tony. There's been a lot of sort of things playing out in the media there over months.
4 resignations of councillors since December of last year, allegations of bullying and mismanagement. And I saw a report that at one stage, 50% of the roles, of effective full-time roles at council weren't filled. So there's 225 effective roles, and they had 112 vacancies. So that council, which is sort of covers, there's only 8,000 people around that Tennant Creek area, but 325,000 square kilometres is seriously under, you know, its personnel numbers at the moment, and you know, probably rightly needs to be closely scrutinised by government.
So an investigator's been appointed to look into those issues and report back by March. The council's not been dismissed; it's been suspended until the outcome of that investigation. So I'd say we'll be coming back to that one when we know a bit more in the coming months.
And it's interesting, Chris, there's been a comment from a former councillor in this case who's come out and said it's a good thing for the community that we can get a clean room there and we start again. So there's obviously been some systemic concerns for some time around this council. So interesting to see what they find. What
develops. Julie, you'll be interested in this one, a bit of a sense of deja vu for us coming out of New South Wales, where councils are saying to the government, stop picking on us for the root cause of the housing crisis. We're doing our bit. There's a whole range of other factors, very much mirroring what's been said in Victoria in recent weeks.
Exactly. It's the same stuff. You know, they've rejected all these allegations that they are solely responsible for the withdrawal of development applications, adding to the state's housing crisis, and called on the state government to look at end-to-end performance of the planning system. So, they're really thinking that they've been targeted unfairly, and good on them for coming out and saying that. I think it's important to have a look at what else is happening in the housing space. Now, we know that in the housing statement that came out, there were a number of different solutions that were put. It wasn't just about, planning applications and dealing with planning applications. There are a number of other things that the government are proposing. So, that is a recognition in itself that it's not just about, planning decisions and the hold up of planning decisions. So anyway, look, I think it's good that they've come out and said that. They have spoken about, how many development applications were received in New South Wales over the past 2 financial years. It's significant in relation to housing, and they've not had that many withdrawals in relation to those. They're looking really closely at their application processes, and they're looking at the numbers, and they're keeping an eye on how that's translating out on the ground in terms of delivery. So, I support their position, and I think that it's good to see councils joining together and making that kind of advocacy statement.
Yep. More of the same in New South Wales and in Queensland, as we talked about last week with the housing and planning reforms. I think the discourse between councils and the state government in Queensland's been a little bit challenged as well. So we're going to see a lot more of that, I'd say, until this all settles down, which hopefully won't take too long as all these changes take place. Did you want to add anything there, Tony?
Look, I just think that this kind of finger pointing between the two levels of government, this kind of play the blame game type thing, it's just not constructive.
It's not helpful,
frankly.
is it? No.
And this is what happens in a crisis, isn't it? When you've got a crisis and you realise you've got a crisis, then the fingers come out and the blame game starts. Whose fault is it? Who can we blame in this situation? Well, let's all just work together and just solve the problem. It's like it's like the Yarra's approach towards, zero homelessness. Let's work together and try and find a solution rather than blaming someone for, the mess that we're in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well said, Julie. You might have just given me the title for today's episode. Let's just all work together and solve the problem.
That's right.
I'm going to skip to our overseas items and the picks of the week here because, Julie, you're going to focus in on, surprise, surprise, Scotland.
Yes, well, I'm a bit annoyed that I didn't pick this up, that it was coming when I was over there. But it's interesting that they've frozen council tax in Scotland in the next financial year because they're recognising that people are struggling with the effects of high inflation. So the First Minister who's in charge of this has announced this just this week. So they're saying it's going to benefit every taxpayer in Scotland. So they've effectively taken the control away from the councils and said, right, this is it. We're just going to freeze everything. Because they're saying that there's too much strain on households. So very popular decision, no doubt.
Some interesting points in the detail here too, Julie, in that the government has said that they will fund councils for that foregone revenue so that there's no impact on the delivery of services, which I thought was really good to see. And there's also some reference to the stuff that you were talking about when you were over there talking to councillor about a longer-term reform piece for the council tax system.
That's right. Yeah, that's really good news. The fact that they are looking at that and they're going to work together with COSLA, who is the association that looks after local government. So fantastic news from that point of view. But an interesting popular decision by the government that's been taken away from councils, and they're going to sort of obviously compensate them. But it is the long-term issue that needs to be addressed. This is like a sort of a temporary band-aid solution to a problem. It's kind of similar to, and I know it's a different issue altogether, but it's similar to the issue of Strathbogie Council getting out of school crossing supervisors because they are saying no longer can we afford this, and then the government giving them a band-aid sort of short-term financial contribution towards delivering that service. But what's the long-term sort of solution towards a cost shifting challenge. So, similar challenge there in Scotland. Yeah, look, it's interesting. The Scottish government, they're saying that they've increased resources available to local government in 23-24 by more than £793 million. And in real terms, an increase of 376 million or 3% compared to the 22-23 budget figures. So haven't seen any response from local government to this that was in the media. They're probably staying quiet at the moment, but no doubt we'll be working with COSLA to work on that long-term solution.
It might be just a little too soon because that announcement was only made in the last couple of days. Tony?
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't this the example for the Victorian government? If you're going to cap rates, if you're going to freeze rates or cap rates or constrain councils from raising revenue, then you need to provide alternative sources of revenue, or the end result is going to be a cutting of services. And I don't know whether the extent of the additional funding that the Scottish government has provided is sufficient here, but at least the measure has been accompanied by this, increase in funding in real terms. And, you said, obviously, Julie, that's occurred. Well, it hasn't been obvious in Victoria. This is what we would expect to see in Victoria with future rate capping measures.
It's a good example.
I don't think you'll get any arguments from this panel there. Tony, your pick of the week is out of Brisbane. You're going all floral on us.
Yeah,
is this the gardener
look,
in you coming out?
Oh, that's me. If you belong to one of these big capital city councils, I guess it's nice to have a floral emblem.
Ah.
But did you know that since 1930, right up till October of this year, Brisbane's sole official floral emblem was a plant from native to, wait for it, Mexico.
Really?
Not sure how that came about, but the red poinsettia, which apparently grows quite well in the Brisbane area, has been the official floral emblem. Nothing native about it.
No.
So after a 7-month process, community nominations, community voting, the drum roll, Brisbane wattle has been selected to stand alongside the red poinsettia as the new floral emblem of Brisbane. You'll be glad to know the Brisbane wattle is indigenous to the Brisbane area. So I think it's a fitting outcome, and it sort of made me wonder about, is there some, I don't know, council in Shropshire in England that's got the Sturt Desert Pea or something like that as its emblem.
Research
I don't
project
think
there.
I'm going to do that kind of research for you, Tony. But anyway, can I say I think this is wonderful, and I think it's, there's nothing better than a beautiful yellow native flowered plant to represent, Brisbane and the sunshine that's up there. So good on them for making the change. It's almost as nice as a lemon Sara Lee cheesecake.
I can't argue there. I do notice, though, Tony, they seem to be having a bit of a bet each way here. So they're now saying it's an additional floral emblem. The red poinsettia is not going away.
I did notice that. They're obviously popular up there, the poinsettias. I'll have to look out next time I'm up in Brisbane to see if I can count the wattles versus the poinsettias. But
Indeed.
yeah, no, look, a good initiative at least. Adding this.
I've got a pick of the week for you guys. I'm not sure I've ever heard of this happening. You might tell me you have, where a long-term council CEO resigns and then within a matter of weeks is reappointed as the interim CEO until a recruitment process we would expect is undertaken. So he resigned and leaving and is now back as an interim. And perhaps not that controversial, except in this case it is controversial because this is the council in New Zealand, Gore, where the CEO and the mayor needed an intermediary because their relationship had completely broken down.
Yeah, look, in my view, if they don't want you, if you don't want to be there, you normally don't hang around, you get out.
Yeah.
But I think the problem at Gore Council, Chris, is that there seems to be a queue of senior people departing the building.
That's true.
There's been quite a number of senior officers who might otherwise have filled the interim CEO role have left. So in a decision that wasn't unanimous, the councillors have appointed I think his name's Stephen Parry back into this, to be the interim CEO pending finding a replacement. So, the shenanigans go on at Gore Council.
They sure do.
Ditch.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. So the deputy CEO, I'm not sure if that was a formal title, but certainly has been described as that in the press, was expected to be appointed the interim, but he resigned at the start of last week, has gone to Invercargill City Council. So perhaps a bit of common sense there in asking Stephen to stay on, but there's also been some suggestions there might be some legal matters afoot as well. So perhaps stay tuned. All right, that's Gore District Council. I do want to mention this one briefly because it made me laugh. In England, a councillor was accused of playing Angry Birds in the chamber while the mayor and the deputy mayor were speaking. Disrespectful. The councillor came back, get this, guys, said, I wasn't playing Angry Birds. I was watching a video on WhatsApp that was sent to me by another councillor in the meeting. So is that any better?
Sorry, Chris, what's that? What are you talking about?
Can you put your phone away, Tony? Well,
we've all done it, haven't we? I mean, we've all kind of looked at a text or something when we shouldn't in a meeting and maybe even responded to it when it wasn't an emergency, but it's a bad look. Clearly a bad look, and that's why it's nice for the chair of a meeting to remind councillors to get off their devices, that sort of thing. And Councillor Phil Cole in Yorkshire somewhere, I think, has been caught out.
Yeah, that's right. But we don't hold that against the people in Yorkshire. Interesting to think about the future of this, because we've got a whole new generation coming through of younger people that are going to become councillors that are addicted to their devices. I can see that, happening, and how is that going to impact on them stepping in as a councillor and want to use their device and want to, engage in that more electronic way. So I think it's worth thinking about, the new generation coming through, how they would operate as a councillor and how they would expect to be able to access their device and use their device on a more regular basis at council. So that's yet another challenge for mayors and CEOs across the sector.
Yes, it's a good point.
More young people run for council.
I think that's a really good point, Julie. I hadn't thought about that. So perhaps that's got to be, as you say, made part of that consideration, that training as we move towards the next batch of councillors, which is now, not quite less than 12 months, but certainly we're almost to the end of caretaker by this time next year, and we're only about a week away from the election this time.
Can I say, just on that, I spent again some time this week out at Whittlesea Council, out at South Morang, where through the council officer cohort led by the CEO, Craig Lloyd, are really investing in some preparedness training for council officers for the return of elected officials to that municipality. Things like, what's the council or staff interaction protocol? What's the division between the different roles of, mayor and CEO and council staff, etc. So, it's quite a lot of work being done. And I think lessons from places like South Gippsland and that have been through these experiences, returning of councillors. So we'll see that play out over future months.
Yes, and of course Casey, another council that's returning to elected representation next year after a period of administration. A few classified notes now before we wrap this one up. For those who were registered for the Children's Week webinar and the first of a series of housing webinars, those episodes will be coming out to you in the coming days. Two terrific panels that have been held this week by VLGA Connect. There's more to come in the housing series, so check that out on the VLGA website to get in and register for all these discussions around the state government's housing statement, the implementation of housing and planning reforms with some wide-ranging impacts for the local government sector in Victoria. I've got some bad news, guys.
Oh,
There'll be no TGU next week.
oh, Chris, how are people going to cope?
Well, I'm hoping we can soften the blow by giving them an extra episode of VLGA Connect Local Leaders.
Fantastic. That's great news.
So,
Who have we got coming
It's like
up?
reruns of MASH. Just watch old episodes of TGU.
you can do that anytime you like, of course. No,
Who's
coming.
Who's coming on Local Leaders?
So coming next week, we're going to talk to Dr. Josh Fergus, who's the Vice President of the VLGA and a councillor at Monash. Very interesting chap. And speaking of interesting chaps, Hardy Saab is the Mayor of Kingston City Council. I've had a terrific chat with Hardy, very impressive individual, and that episode's coming out, I think, on Thursday next week, just to soften the blow that there'll be no TGU dropping in your queue on Friday of next week. It's only a week off, folks, so don't stress. We'll be back the week after that with TGU.
And we love Hardy, so we're so looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Excellent.
He's one of my favourites.
Yes,
and
I've had
have
some dealings with him, a nice young fella. Good to see some youth in the mayoral stakes out there at Kingston as well. And I just want to shout out to Loddonshire. I spent the day with at Loddonshire in Serpentine, north of Bendigo yesterday, and the whole council, all the different depots, the whole council complement got together at the Serpentine Hall for some, long service recognition awards, and of course some training from people like me. And great initiative by Lincoln Fitzgerald, the CEO, to see the whole group interacting, getting together when, they might not see each other as often when they're, working out of different places and different towns.
Good stuff. Well done. All right, guys, let's wrap it up unless there's anything else. That's another TGU in the can for the 20th of October, 2023. Can you believe it? That snowball's coming down the hill towards you, Julie. I know you've got things to get off to, and to you, Tony. So thank you both, as always. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
That's TGU from VLGA Connect. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube to make sure you don't miss our extra episodes that are coming at you very soon. Bye for now.